Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here for the blockchain and cryptocurrencies in the digital era, which is organized by IEEE Computer Society chapters from Panama and Peru. First, we have Dr. Ramesh Ramadov. Fernando, can you give an introduction?
Perfect. Hello and welcome all for the event Blockchain and Cryptocurrencies in the Digital Era. As the title said, we will discuss topics about blockchain and cryptocurrencies, especially in how it's been applied and how its cryptocurrencies is changing the world. Dr. Ramesh Ramadas is a co-chair of the IEEE Blockchain Initiative. He leads the IEEE Blockchain Standards Committee. He also serves on the expert panel of the European Union Blockchain Observatory. He received his PhD degree in electrical engineering from the University of Colorado at Boulder, USA in 2003. Between 2003 and 2007, he was employed as an assistant professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Auburn University in USA. In 2008, he moved to Silicon Valley and has over a decade of industrial experience in technology companies. He has conducted research and development projects for DARPA, NASA, U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force, Sandia National Labs, and Motorola Labs. He is the author and co-author of one book, 3 books, chapters, and 55 research papers. He has delivered talks at over 90 international conferences in 40 countries. He has been a member of IEEE since 1999 and headed to the grade of IEEE senior member in 2013. Go ahead, Doctor.
Thanks for the intro. Thanks for inviting me, Frank. So how much time do I have now? It's 7 minutes gone. So I'll maybe you just give me a, raise your hand or something when the time is up.
That's it.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah, I should be close to 15 minutes. So maybe I'll have a timer here just in case. So, okay. So today I'm going to talk about, what is blockchain and where it's useful. So here's the outline of my talk. So it should be, the part 1 should be pretty basic. So you should be able to follow. And even part 2 should be, you can see what's happening in the in this ecosystem. So we'll start with the first part, which is, when you hear I talk about blockchain, you'll hear this word trust quite often. So I wanted to start with that. And as you know, social trust is the underlying foundation of all relationships. It can be categorized into interpersonal trust, which is actually between people, and the institutional trust, which is actually the trust we have as citizens on institutions such as banks, governments, and corporations. And in 2008, as we all know, the economic crisis was caused by financial institutions, and people lost trust on these institutions, and we didn't have much of a choice. Even now, we primarily depend on centralized institutions. And now the question was, is it possible to design a financial system that does not depend on a centralized institution or controlled by a central person or entity? Enter Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was launched as an electronic cash that does not depend on a centralized institution. And the idea was published as a white paper back in October 2008 by an anonymous person. He or she or they. The white paper has his name on it, Satoshi Nakamoto. Interestingly, the person put a note from the Times newspaper about the economic crisis. And the code was launched in January 2009. And what you see on the left side is the first block, what we call as the Genesis block. And it does seem like a timely launch, Bitcoin, but if you look at the history, the background work has been going on for a while. That's the idea of this slide. You can see It's basically a recipe that was, based on several ideas from cryptography, consensus protocols, peer-to-peer networks. So you can see on the left side, I listed a few key ideas or ingredients. So this anonymous person, Satoshi Nakamoto's genius was actually in creating this recipe, and putting together these ideas: Merkle trees, timestamping, proof of algorithm, hashing algorithm. And in fact, if you look on the right side, there have been previous attempts before Bitcoin to create a digital cash. Like you can see the list, at least 5 ideas. There's a lot more, but I listed a few. So, but however, it turns out that Bitcoin was the first successful electronic cash deployed on a large scale with thousands of nodes. And as I know, I have one more node on the side. You can see there's been peer-to-peer platforms before Bitcoin, not related to electronic cash, like Skype, Napster, BitTorrent. They're all peer-to-peer platforms. So you can see a lot of background work happened before the launch of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin was a successful launch of purely decentralized electronic cash. Now, what happened was Bitcoin actually set the stage for a revolution, where it actually gave birth to a new field called blockchain, and that has gone through 3 stages of evolution the last 11, 12 years now. So blockchain 1.0 is actually the Bitcoin, which actually inspired many other altcoins, and they're all called blockchain 1.0. And then blockchain 2.0 basically refers to programmable chains such as Ethereum, Corda, Hyperledger. And then the third stage includes new architectures, including DLT, DAG, and we will talk about these things on the next slide. And these were launched, 3.0 architectures were launched to address the limitations of blockchain 2.0, such as interoperability, scalability issues. And if you want to kind of put this, the previous slide showed you the chronological evolution of this field, but if you want to put from a logical perspective of how these things fit, this is what it is. So basically, you have the distributed computer network, which has been around since 1960s, or a lot of work has been going on in that field, where it's just basically a collection of different computers are called as nodes that appear as a single computer for a user. So that's the definition of a distributed computer network. And the DLT is actually a ledger. It's basically an append that stores transactions on a distributed network on multiple nodes or many nodes. Blockchain is a subset. As you can see, it's inside the green box. Is actually a cryptographically secured chain of blocks. That we will look at it on the next slide. And DAG is actually another type of DLT, which stores transactions at the node level. So primarily, we will focus on blockchain, the green box. So let's look at a couple of terminologies before we dive into the rest of the presentation, so you can actually follow what we're talking about. So a block consists of a batch of transactions. So if you have, 10 transactions that says, I gave $10 to Frank, and Frank gave to somebody. So it's just a list of transactions, right? And that's a block. And then the next block would have, another set of transactions. So each block is linked to the previous block using hashing algorithm, and that's what they call the cryptographically secured. And then a chain of these blocks is called a blockchain. These are terminologies with a very high level block, hashing, blockchain. And if you really want to see a demo of how this whole thing that works, that sequence we talk about, if you just go to the demo at the bottom, you can actually do the actual put numbers and see how this works. Now, blockchain can be classified based on the ledger type. Like a ledger could be public, anyone can see it, or it'll be private, like only people on this meeting will see a ledger that's a private ledger. So it's almost like a Google Sheet, where you can actually make it public. Anyone can see a Google link, right? That you have a document on Google Drive, you can make it public to anyone, or you can actually choose to share it with only certain people, certain folks that you put in the email address, or even certain organization. That's actually a private, right? So that's what that is, a public versus private. The ledger in the blockchain could be public or private. And then as far as the validators who are actually approving the transactions, could be an open group or closed group. Again, it comes back to that. I can use the same example, Google Sheet. Like if you send a link to, open a public link, anyone can actually make it, anyone can edit it. So that's actually open, right? And if you make it closed, then only few people can actually edit those things. So using these two, you can actually, classify blockchain into like three major types, like permissionless public type, and there's like hybrid type, which is a mixture of public and closed, and then you have private blockchain. So all the stuff we talk about in the next few slides would fall into these categories, like permissionless public type. Startups use that, and then you have the private enterprises would use that hybrid. There's a mix. So let's move on to the next section. Now, the question is, where is it useful, right? The blockchain. I have 8 minutes. So if you, just to summarize, right? Over the last more than a decade, all those things we talked about, blockchain, DLT, DAG, they've all evolved to like, it's a basket of a collection of distributed computer network architectures that basically, what does it provide? I mean, what does it do? I mean, that's a red underlined sentence you have. Is basically a trusted environment among untrusted participants or organizations, or even like a multiple fragmented systems. So that's what it enables. So it's in summary, that's what it is. It provides trust. Remember, we talked about trust in the beginning, but it's in a computing environment, right? You can't extend it to like a social trust, meaning I trust somebody. It's not outside the system, it's in the system, and those participants are in the system operating a node. So now, as you can see there on the left side, I have a toolbox. It's like a toolbox. All these different architectures are different different tools in a toolbox, and you can use it for different purposes. And you can do 3 things with all these architectures you have. Either you can store data, you can do computing, or you can do communication or networking. Just like a phone that we have, what do? We typically do these 3 things, store data, computing, or networking, communication primarily, right? It's just like a computer too. So it's a computer, distributed computer, so you can't expect anything beyond that. But the thing is, it has these protocols that enable, that provide trust, that enables building, the building of these use cases you see on the right side, like digital asset, provenance, tracking of record of ownership, because it's immutable. The record on blockchain is immutable. And then autonomy, multi-party computation, machine-to-machine transaction, and so on. So these are very high-level use cases. And now we will go through 3 different cases, like what's happening in the startup ecosystem, enterprise, and governments. So if you want to see what's happening in the public permissionless blockchain, this is where all the startups are doing experiments. It's actually easier to see what's happening. If you just go to CoinMarketCap, you can see all the projects. Typically, they are funded by these tokens that they launched. So you can see all of them in the CoinMarketCap.com. There's thousands of projects. In fact, as of June 25th, that was yesterday, there's over 10,642 coins. They're all actually projects. Each coin is typically linked to a project, open source blockchain project. And the total market cap of all of these digital asset. Remember, we talked about digital asset on the previous slide. If we were to go back, you see the first item on the use case, digital asset. So that's pretty much what these are, digital asset. The total market cap is 1.3 trillion. Now, if you look at just one project, a blockchain project, Ethereum, which is it falls under 2.0. You can see even on this, there's a whole lot of startups building different projects like scaling, infrastructure, exchanges, analytics, and all that. Sorry, I think the neighbor's baby is crying. So you can get an idea of a lot of experiments happening, and then to see the experiments, I put this graph where it shows time-wise, like it's starting at 2009, Bitcoin, altcoins were launched, and then stable coins were launched. Ethereum was launched in 2016. And then several experiments are happening in the space, like ICO, IEO, STO. Currently, like NFT and DeFi are pretty hot. And all these experiments actually led to these red items, like Libra. Facebook launched this Libra Dime project. They're trying to create a corporate currency issued on blockchain. And CBDC, we'll talk about it on the last slide, government's trying to use and issue currency on blockchain. So it seems like all this R&D is happening in this open source community, and big companies and governments are taking advantage of the experiments happening in the open source community. Now let's move on to the enterprise ecosystem. The enterprise ecosystem, if you look at the Forbes 50, blockchain 50 that was published back in, like, I guess February of last year, they'll publish one this year as well, but this from last year, they basically listed top 50 or large companies working in the blockchain DLT space. And they even actually, this company called Block Data, now it's part of CB Insights, they took that list and they basically categorized them based on the use cases. You can see the use cases: capital market, supply chain, which in fact, I think you will hear about it today, agriculture supply chain, the next talk. And then you have payments, you have identity, I will talk about it, about identity. So you can see many use cases, and enterprises are very actively working on the blockchain space. Now, if you take the same list and if you try to categorize them based on the technology, if you, at the bottom, you can see the x-axis, the technology used. It basically Hyperledger Fabric, Ethereum, and Corda turns out to be the top 3 technologies used by these large enterprises, 50. So in fact, if you want to get into this enterprise space, you have to learn one of those technologies, coding, programming, and then you can actually, get a job. Now, let's talk about the government use cases. I think I have like a couple of minutes left. So government use cases, the first one is the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, EBSI. This is a project funded by the European Commission. And the idea is to build a system, a cross-border infrastructure for the entire, like, I think there's 26 European countries or European members in the European Union. So basically, if they issue an identity, if one country issues an identity, it can be actually verified in all countries. Today, it's not the case. If Germany issues an identity, if that person moves to the next country like Poland, they have to get a new identity from Poland. So this would solve that problem, having one infrastructure, but all the member countries trust that system. So this is a case where multiple fragmented systems can be combined into one by using blockchain. Now, you can also see several other use cases that I have. Identity is one of the top use cases they're looking at. Now, one more thing I wanted to talk about was the central bank digital currencies. We talked about it on the graph. I showed you how, now governments and central banks, 86% of the central banks worldwide, you can see on the map, they're actually conducting research on how to issue currency on blockchain. So and then what happens is then they can actually send, you can get paid on your phone. And of course, it gets easier for governments to collect taxes and track actually money laundering, all those things. So they don't have to print paper money and distribute. They can actually just issue these things on electronically and track everything. So this is pretty active right now. And you can see dozen projects going on. Now, United Nations last year published a report that actually listed a few use cases like land record management, transparency in supply chain, and so on. In fact, talk about land record management. In some countries, when different parties come to power, you lose your asset, or things change when the property ownership changes. So blockchain could be used to store the record, and it's immutable. It cannot be changed. So I think I'll stop there, and that's the end of my talk. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, you can check out the blockchain.ieee.org. Okay, I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you, Ramesh. Can you do the introduction? Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, with our next speaker, 𝐄𝐕𝐄𝐍𝐓𝐎, who is the principal founder and CEO of AgriLedger. AgriLedger is a company that enables trust, transparency, and traceability through blockchain across the agricultural supply chain. 𝐄𝐕𝐄𝐍 led a collaboration with IT, Ministry of Commerce and Industry to deliver a distributed ledger technology pilot sponsored by the World Bank. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I just got the share button, so give me 2 seconds, please. So you should be seeing my screen now.
Wow, yes.
Perfect. Yes.
So thank
I
you.
love that picture.
Thank you so
Good
much
one,
for
yes.
having me. This is our future. I love this picture also because I really think the strength in these boys is really about what we're going to do and what we look to do for the future. I'd first also like to say thank you very much to IEE Panama for having me. I have had the pleasure of actually flying through Panama on my way to Haiti. I'm trying to find all the routes to Haiti as I can, and love the coffee and then in the morning and then empanadas. So I'm looking forward to some more. So today I am going to speak to you about the use of distributed ledger technology for building trust in the food network. As we know, or if some of you are not aware, this I thought really from Chapman House was a great way of demonstrating the whole value chain and global food network. It's very massive, it's complex, and therefore rather difficult to regulate. And if we look at something which is very interesting in this map is that we don't see what's coming out of Africa. The biggest the biggest thing that comes from Africa is cocoa and coffee, and we don't see this on this map. And one of the things is that because of that, there is a lot of risk, a lot of issues, and populations are growing. FAO thinks that by 2050, we will be sitting at 9.1 billion. I think that given the pandemic, we might be seeing a little more because there's a lot of babies which are being made in the last time. But unfortunately, is that many of those, we see a decrease in birth rate in the West, while we see an increase in Africa and Asia, where food is really needed. So in terms of the food industry, there is also an underinvestment in technology that happens. The technology, one of the things that we see is that also there are about 940 billion lost for food waste. About 8% of that waste is actually contributing to green gas and emission, and 7 in 10 do not have enough to eat. Again, the pandemic wasn't a very good thing for this because we've gone from going in the right direction, but now to over 130 million people not having enough food. So about 1 in 7 individuals do not have enough to eat. Now, the technology solutions are in agriculture are advancing. You have satellite remote sensing. You have genetic technologies such as genomic, which reduce the processing time, and also tailoring that happens. And what I believe is that we do need to, even though we have all that information, you do need the distributed ledger technology to capture the expense of the food network. And what that does is allow for the removal of centralized database storage. And really, you can start being able to even capture identity management, which is who has actually participated in the creation. So I'm not going to bore you in terms of the types of distributed ledger technology because Dr. Ramados did such a great job. But we at AgriLedger chose to actually use Corda because we wanted that the data is only shared with parties which are relevant and allowing for better regulation. It allows for end-to-end traceability of the products, tracks any financial related item, and it removes, in a way, the need of intermediaries. So we always talk in blockchain about removing middlemen. What the reality of all supply chain is that you're going to need people who are helping in the process. But what we need to do is making sure use that technology to assure that those who are needed are present and also recognized, and those who are not needed, either they provide a different service or other things. So with AgriLedger, we're also looking to use things such as AI, machine learning, and IoT to help in the decision making. The agricultural commodity price has been at its highest level since 2013. As of June 2021, it was 35% higher than January 2020. So what that has done is that really COVID has highlighted the fact that we need to be looking at the food supply chain. What we saw happening was at the beginning of COVID, customers were stockpiling certain goods, and there was really a very slow reaction for retailers to get those in. There were also problems which happened, obviously, with lockdown, catering, and also restaurants had to go down, and the redistribution of those commodities, for lack of a better word, took time. So what also we didn't see was there wasn't enough of redistribution even in the West to charities which needed that because, and you know, I talked before about how 7 out of 10 individuals were hungry or not having enough food. That was in the US in November 2020 that this was shown. So if these people are losing their job, they don't have enough money to feed themselves. So therefore, this is where we saw this issue with food. And also the agriculture producers had significant loss because some of them were really producing more for the restaurant, those cruise ships and all these hotels, and their customers had disappeared. So the immediate effect that we saw by COVID in the food system are really becoming current policy challenge, but the long term, and also highlighted the issues in the long term. Now, I'm going to take you on a little trip of what we have actually done in this space. So for those of you who have seen so many pictures of Haiti, and lately it's always about how it's breaking down. This is Haiti, this is Labadie. When the Columbus actually came over, he was looking for India, but he thought he had landed in paradise. The history of Haiti is tremendous. For those of you who are not aware, this was the first Black nation to actually gain her independence through force. Also, Haiti in 1948 helped Venezuela get her independence. And that is why actually slavery. Now, another unknown fact is for the trouncing that they did of France in 1790s and declared their independence on 1804, they actually had to pay $40 million to actually atone for that. The reason was that when France gave up on Haiti, they lost over 40% of their GDP because this was where coffee, sugar was coming from, and chocolate. And it was actually higher than even oil production of the UK, which at the time had the Indian continent as part of its price. Finally, if you think about it, a country full of Black former slave was not welcome in terms of trade with the US, which meant Haiti actually went into siege for over 100 years. Today, Haiti continues to be in pain. Part of this has been brought up in part by the Caribe, which was supposed to be a great thing for Venezuela. Venezuela was trying to go against what was happening with the US and giving about 30% discount to be paid later to countries to build their road. Unfortunately, the Haitian government at the time did not try to do that. And in 2018, when the population heard about that, it went into disarray. And as of today, insecurity is actually one of the bigger problems. Haiti was on lockdown before lockdown was happening in the rest of the world. This leads to economic realities, and one, unfortunately, which is common in the American and Caribbean countries, which is reliance on remittance. Now, what blockchain brings in is really the decentralization exchange of value. It is the ability for removing intermediaries, not only in information, but also in the redistribution of wealth. Bitcoin is a very good example of that. But if we can think about really creating the ownership of the asset, this is where it comes in. So when we look at DLT cases, the business decision has to be really part of it. How many are there participating? What are their roles? And also, do they plan to actually be, are their goals different to one another? Does everybody want more than what they should get? So that is why agriculture is a really good framework for that, because you have so many individual participating. And as I showed before, it's very complex. This way you can start really at the regulation. So in Haiti, we started the project, and this little boy is actually one of the first I saw on a when I got to the back no, to the back end. And one of the things that really struck on me is that younger generation are not looking at agriculture as a way of life. This project is with the government of Haiti and was sponsored by the World Bank in looking at how we could systemically bring better symmetry and broader prosperity to the bottom 40% of the population. So in Haiti, we ran the project from the May 2020, so in the height of the pandemic, till July. There was about 6 run, and the average price per kilo that was received by the farmer was about 90 cents. After the project, there was an increase whereby they received $7.50. So this is almost a 750% increase per kilo for what was on market, removing from all the costs that are necessary with it. It created a much better and much equitable distribution for the farmers. So a little bit about the AgriLedger solution. It's an end-to-end, fully traceable platform that enables pricing of the value chain, incorporating the financing, the payment, and also other aspects such as geotagging, sensors, and IoT. In terms of a communication, what we do is that it's very simple. From the harvesting, we actually send SMS messages, so farmers do not need to have smartphones. And from that, the fruits are collected, tagged, QR code like this. The customer to actually connect with their food and be able to look even at recipe. So very quickly, I'll take you through what it looks like. This is the screen that the customer would be looking at, along the whole idea of not only who the farmer was, being able to tell the journey, the worth of that item, and finally, again, recipes. So in terms of technology, we look at supply chain, know your customer, payment, and the blockchain. And for that, we're using R3, which we believe is one of the most advanced permission blockchain. Dr. Ramados talked about a few that are coming, which are very interesting, such as Cardano and Algorand. But for what we needed to do, this was, to our knowledge, the best on the market. Now, I just quickly want to take you to how the smart contract is working in terms of the banking. Using smart contract at self-fulfillment, we work toward the distribution. We are not a tokenized system. What we do is we capture information, help make those decisions in the smart contract, and distribute both to the producer, logistic, warehouse, broker, and you can imagine even their governments. when a payment comes in, there is either the physical payment coming in, but we're also looking at how factoring can be done so that not only does it help the buyer in terms of the liquidity, but also addresses the liquidity of the rest of the value chain. So this is really how we at AgriLedger are looking to bring in more trust in the food network. It's established through an independent auditing, rating, and provenance. And by evidencing the food belonged to the individual who produced it, we can trust that they can get paid. This lifts off the pressure to them to sell early to chain for produce prices. Thank you very much. And if you have any question, please feel free to drop me a note at hello@agriledger.com. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. That's really interesting how blockchain can be applied to many interesting things. Perfect. Okay, to continue with the event, we have our next speaker,
Lucas, I think.
Lucas Fitzflecker, who comes from Austria and has been dealing with the topic of Bitcoin blockchain daily for over 6 years. On Medium and YouTube, he combined his knowledge from business and technology. He also has become an author and co-author of several crypto books. He also writes blogs for well-known crypto projects and gives crypto coaching sessions worldwide, mainly in Canada and in German-speaking countries. Let's welcome Lucas.
Thanks, Fernando, for this nice invitation. Also, Frank. And now I'm sharing the presentation. 1 second. So, yeah, today we heard a lot about blockchain, crypto, and the stuff is, for me, is amazing. And at the end now, we're talking a little bit about the cryptocurrencies in the future and how maybe they are changing the world. And at the beginning, I want to ask you really a simple and important question. Why should you save money when they are printing money? Quite simple. We have been told to do that. So question all that, because if you can't think, no one can help you. And I personally, I question all this. And together today we will dive in the crypto rabbit hole, and we are exploring its corridors. And yes, the goal of this talk is not to persuade you to do anything, but to get you thinking and to show you that there is more to cryptocurrencies and to Bitcoin than you think. Yes. Yeah, thanks for the invitation. I think I can skip this this screen now, because you told everything I'm blocking. I'm since 2015 in the crypto rabbit hole, and maybe you hear the accent. I'm from Austria, and now we go further to the evolution of money. I want to talk with you about the evolution of money, because it's very important to know how money was in the past and how important is money in the future. And the history of money goes back very far into the past of mankind. Money is even older than writing itself. And you know, throughout history, money has taken many forms in the past. For example, you see here the shells here, or very big stones, and they all served as money. And in the past, it was the easiest way to exchange values, objects, or food this way. And all this starting with the barter, like the cows here, and money always been developing. It's never ending. The evolution is always up. It's always going on. And as I said, we have used the shells, the gold, or all the heavy stones, such here the rice stones. It was the first decentralized currency in the world, maybe 3,000 years ago. And also you can see in the middle here the Chinese paper. For me, it's really awesome because the Chinese were the first to take hard money from the people. Like the Chinese government promised the people that this paper bill was 100% backed by gold. People had to give their own gold to the government, and they have to trust in it. It's so crazy, but what is the key? What is the key here? The people, they were given the so-called the soft money, and the state, the government in China, came into tons of gold. They get the real value, and this is, for me, it was the beginning of how the government and all the big ones stealing the hard money from the people. And it's the same with the dollar. Maybe one of you know that the President Nixon lifted the gold standard, and since this time we are all slaves of the Americans. Every World Bank, and almost every big company in the world is in debt in dollars. And this is, for me, is so crazy, because those who sit closest to the money printing machines, they profit the most from it. And so it's so hard, because they can print as much money as they want. And for me, it's unbelievable. And you know, through the internet came the online banking and the credit card users. And from this time on, the money exists only almost only on the computer, and consists like Bitcoin on lots of zeros and ones, like a programming code. And expect that, as we heard before, Bitcoin is alive since 2009, and I think Bitcoin is one station of the evolution of money. Nobody knows what will happen in the future, but I can say that Bitcoin is one of the only currencies which has an intrinsic value, and it is really limited. And I think nowadays it's so different, or maybe any one of you uses gold for payment. I think not. And in our modern world, most of the people will probably think that when they are talking about money, they are all talking about paper money, and the money is, they're only just numbers stored on our bank's computers. And I'm always thinking to me, so what? So how is Bitcoin different from that? Bitcoin is different because at its core, it is very different kind of money than the money the currents are using, because Bitcoin is in the core, as I said before, a new representation of money. When paper money was introduced, no one believed in the beginning in the value of these forms of payment. The majority of people, they trusted they trusted in it until the gold standard was also removed, and so began the path where unfortunately the inflation rules our lives. And here on this picture you can see that the basic of the basis of our society is money. And, you know, money coordinates our life together. For example, you put money in and economy comes out, very simple. And with money and the economy, it's like water and the potato field. Like if the economy has not so much money, it dries up. But if it's flooded with too much money, then we drown in oversupply and the economy rots. And yes, this is currently what happens, right? And the value of the fiat money, like the euro or the dollar, is secured through the power of the government. And so it's so hard for me. It's always the same. The inventors of the fiat money abuse the money for their own power. And the history of money shows us one thing really clearly. Money is a collective belief. And the phenomenal increase in value the Bitcoin has displaced since the represents the numbers of people who now believe in Bitcoin. This is because the more people will believe in Bitcoin, the higher its value will become. And as you see on the presentation, money is always an illusion, a mass hallucination. We work hard to earn it, multiply it, and keep it. But even then, the only thing real about it is the symbolic power. While the paper and the coins themselves are material, the dollar they represent is not. There is no material behind the US dollar, only the faith of the fools who accept it as payment. Really, it's fact. And the main difference with Bitcoin is that the illusion of the dollar, at least for now, is rather widespread and more widely believed. And in contrast, as you can see really nicely here, the purchasing power of the dollar is decreasing more and more. Thus, a bank inflation arises since more and more and more money supply is added. You can see here in this picture really good. And with some cryptocurrencies, the best one here maybe is Bitcoin. We don't see a bank inflation, but a price inflation. Very important. We are seeing here a price inflation. And because since the price can only go up in the long term due to the scarcity and the increasing demand in cryptocurrencies. And all in all, the purchasing power also increases, yes. And now on here you can see it about the crypto rights. What rights do we have with cryptocurrencies? Sorry about that, but I'm since 6 years now in the crypto market, and I'm a really early adopter in Bitcoin. I'm really fascinating about the economics about Bitcoin and the philosophy about Bitcoin. And yeah, I'm really in the rabbit hole, and sorry for that I'm only speaking about Bitcoin, but there are also another really good cryptocurrencies out there, like, for example, Polkadot or Ethereum. But today I want to give you the money aspect and the economy aspect of cryptocurrencies. And Bitcoin really gives you real control over your wealth, because Bitcoin is organic and Bitcoin is healthy. There will never be more than 21 units of Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin's programmatic monetary policy abstracts itself from the corruption of the people. And this is the cool thing, because Bitcoin has no leader. It belongs to all of us, and this this is the next kind of money, because every money comes from a government, and there has never been a money from the community. And for me, this is so special to cryptocurrencies, and therefore no one can confiscate your bitcoins or prevent you from using them. And this are all facts in cryptocurrencies. I like it, and for sure, I think if the government or anyone locks your bank account, at the moment you have the possibility to live a life by your fullest only with cryptocurrencies. It's really possible. And yeah, the most important thing, if you have the money at your own, is that you have your private keys, right? Because if you have your private keys, then you own the property rights. And this is, and over time, the scarcity of the supply of new Bitcoin continues to increase the value of the units already in circulation. And by keeping your Bitcoins, your wealth is protected over time. And this is hard to understand, but if you hodl, like most of the people are saying in the crypto space, Bitcoin gives you long-term the freedom to live your life on your own terms. And so for me, maybe you understand this quote now, but one big, really hard difference between $1 and Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies is that you can lend or borrow dollars, but you can own Bitcoin. And now we talked about what is Bitcoin, and the other guys talked about CBDCs, what will happen. And I think, in my opinion, new digital doctrines, like they are at the moment developing. I don't know what will happen in the future, but as was the case back then, for example, the breakthrough of the internet or the printing press with Martin Luther's 95 theses. For digitalization, younger generations are striving for development toward freedom and peace, and this is the main reason what should have the new money for the community. For me, there should be $1, yes, of course, but I think the dollar, the money should used by the community. Like the people, they should believe in the money what they are using. They should believe more and more that with a new kind of money, they will have peace and absolute freedom with the money they are using. And for me, yes, the CBDCs, for me, I'm not the biggest fan of CBDCs, but I think the central banking digital currencies will come sooner or later. But for me, that will not change anything. Because instead of making a conventional bank transfer right now, the whole thing will then run via a centrally controlled blockchain. It's faster, right? It's cheaper, right? But the question is, do you want to be part of this network if you have better use cases, maybe with other cryptocurrencies? And I think in the future, when the people are understanding what the main use case of Bitcoin or Ethereum is, by the way, I don't need the dollar anymore, but the government, they want that we are using their money, because then they are in the good position. And for me, the future now with money, as I said, is in decentralization. and the crypto market will continue to grow. Now at the moment we are maybe in 3 months bear market, but it will grow, and yes, at the end, maybe what is really important to me, to CBDCs, maybe yes, that should be the goal of a CBDC. Maybe it's good that it's backed by number X% capped with Bitcoin, for example. I would love this, because then we have again a standard for money. We have a standard for weight like kilogram, but why don't we have a standard for money? And I'm always buying Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies for hedging against inflation. And now to talk also a little bit about the COVID-19 crisis. Bitcoin reminds us of the role gold, the physical gold, has played in human history. It is becoming increasingly difficult for the average person to exchange soft money into hard money. And I hope that every one of you knows now that it's important to exchange soft money like fiat money into hard money like diamonds, art, Bitcoin, stuff like that. And finally, at this point, the crypto space, it's still we are still early adopters right now, and now the cool one, and one of my last sentences. Investing always involves risk. Without risk, no value can be created. And politicians and the government, they don't take risk because it's not their own money, and therefore they don't create real value. We have the opportunity to help shape the new digital tenets. We cannot change Bitcoin right now, but Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies can change us. Thanks for your attention, guys.
Thanks to you, Lucas.
Yeah.
I will retrieve the words you say. Without risk, no value can be created. Perfect phrase. Okay, now we're gonna to start with some questions for the speakers, and I will ask the first, which is we have been talking about blockchain and the middleman and how it removes. I want to ask, with blockchain, is the world ready to give off control to the technology and not so much middlemen? Of course, this is a question all speakers can answer.
So I'll take
Perfect.
this question. I think we speak illy of the middlemen, mostly in the space of agriculture. What we forget, though, is those individuals have a role, which is to provide liquidity, but they also take greater risk. What you get with blockchain technology is the reduction of risk. The asset is basically given to an individual. So if we talk about what's happening, I didn't hear much today about NFT, but NFT is one way in which a lot of creatives are starting to retain the ownership to the goods that they have created and being able to partake in future benefits that may come from that. So really what blockchain technology, DLT, allows is to create governance on how people interact with one another and what are the rewards or a fairer, equitable distribution. So when it comes to what I do in agriculture, I don't expect the producer to always be the one which wins better, but I expect him to be going from 2% to at least 30% of the value which is received at the end. This is where the disparity exists right now. And what distributed ledger technology does as its core is, since no one can control all the details, we then have to put our effort, our information in a way that it can be shared.
Excellent answer. Dr. Lucas, do you want to speak more on another thing about the topic?
I think for me, blockchain is like for younger generation, and I think like in the future, I'm always talking in network effects, like the critical mass, and I think we will see in the blockchain industry, when maybe we five guys here, we now at the moment we all have a smartphone, and maybe 15 years ago, for 15 years, 3 of us has a smartphone, and at any time in the future there will be the moment that everyone has to be in the blockchain space, or maybe he's using the blockchain without his knowing at the moment that he's using the blockchain. And for me, the blockchain is now really is now in a really good shape, but I think in the future everyone will participate with it. Yes.
Perfect. We can pass to the next question, which is by Ludwig Herschel. Is more for Genevieve. It's a question about Agri-Ledger, who says this. I have a question about Agri-Ledger. Large-scale produce distribution has occurred through groups of purchasers and intermediaries who take care of negotiations and transportation. How do you see at a large scale it be possible to achieve this distribution with or many of these intermediaries? I understand at a small scale it be possible to achieve like 750% increase in profitability for the grower, but I have a hard time seeing how can this be achieved at a larger scale.
Sure, I'll take that question, and I'm actually welcoming it. So it was, as you say, it's very hard to maybe imagine, but what this was a breakdown whereby the producer was buying the services, the transportation service. Of course, there's a cost to that. So when that was taken into account, when you get to the 750%, that is part of it. What we're looking to do now is really working with brands and also restaurants, or even, as I mentioned, cruise ship. They all have to purchase those services. However, ESG is the really what most companies say that they are looking at. Social responsibility is one big one. So being able to have transparency into your value chain, into your supply chain is key. And that is why I suggested that it does not need to be 750, but if it is 750 and it works out to be 750, it's what it should be. So the cost of transportation, the cost of transformation needs to be part of that. And what you get with the blockchain is the ability to capture this information and create that view so that you can then look at where are there lost, where are there waste, even wasted food, or if even in manufacturing where the waste is. And this is, then you can have that clarity. Same thing in transportation. Are we taking the wrong route? Are we picking up at the wrong time and therefore sitting in traffic for many hours? Or are we taking too little to market? So these are decisions that we have to make as a world, because the other part of ESG is environmental. And as we all know, this is something that we also need to address.
Thanks for your answer. Continue with questions. We have, what potential applications should we follow closely so we're better prepared to respond early? We're talking about applications of the blockchain. What you can see for the future, I hear in the presentation of the Dr. Ramados talk about that. If you want to answer.
Yeah, I mean, future meaning like how far you're looking into, right? I mean, if today, currently there's a couple of hot topics in the public blockchain space, like DeFi, NFT, those are pretty hot. And in the enterprise space, it's, supply chain, capital market supply chain, which, we heard from Genevieve as well about supply chain. So then in the government space, it's the central bank digital currency. But if you want to really think even further, like I'm talking about 5 to 10 years, what's going to happen? I think Lucas was talking about this, where eventually, blockchain, we won't hear about it. It'll just become part of our life, Usually, like when technology gets implemented, you don't hear much about it anymore. So what could happen if, you need to enable screen sharing. I can show you the slide. So there's going to be, basically blockchain in combination with artificial intelligence, IoT, and here, let me show you what I'm talking about. So here's a slide where, blockchain in combination with AI and big data and IoT will actually create new business opportunities, business models. And in fact, if you look at those intersections, I put some emerging areas, like you see chain data analytics. They've been doing this since 2014. And in fact, they track the cryptocurrencies and they work with the US government and all that. But then there's also like use of blockchain and IoT, where, for securing IoT devices, machine-to-machine transactions. I think also recently, Nokia announced a data marketplace that actually combines all of these. We talked about machine-to-machine transactions, AI, blockchain, private permission blockchain, everything. And they launched, this is last month, May, data marketplace where, data could be traded, tokenized and traded. So this is, I mean, from my perspective, this is what's going to happen in the blockchain space. In addition to all the stuff we talked about, the very short term, I mentioned about, in the beginning, I mentioned about a few hot topics in the very short term. But in the next, like, evolution of the space, it's going to be more of fusion of different areas. So I'll stop sharing.
Perfect. Now the Nokia example was amazing. Okay. Another question that we can see is some of the news that is currently happening in Latin America, especially in El Salvador, because El Salvador has become the first country to adopt Bitcoin as a legal cryptocurrency. Okay, let's talk about El Pulgarcito, it's what it's called, because it's a little small country that have the US dollar, and also like Panama. Panama, we are using dollars too. But El Salvador wants to go ahead and put Bitcoin as a legal currency in the country. Is this a win or a lose? This is really a smart decision, or really a decision that is not being thinking properly, because this is something that is being talking about in social media and everything. What do you think, Lucas?
Yeah, it's really cool what happens and at the moment in El Salvador, but because yes, you know, as I said before, the network effects, and I think the El Salvador, it's a sign for the future because they were the first country which accepts Bitcoin, and for me it's so amazing because I think they have over 6 million inhabitants, and every one of them gets $30 in Bitcoin. And this is kind of mass adoption, guys. This is so cool. And yeah, it's only good. And as you can see, when one when this starts with El Salvador, maybe in the future, in the soon future, Paraguay, Brasilia, maybe Argentina, don't know what will happen, but I think that El Salvador will not be the only country which accepts Bitcoin. And the cool thing is that the Fed and the national banks, they don't want to work with them, but in their writings, in their balance sheet, or I don't know how to say it, they are writing that they have to support every kind of currency what a state will have, and this is awesome. Yes.
Yeah, this is was really shocking when I saw it. I cannot believe how Bukele was so fast to make this
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Fernando, as a former banker, I'd like to bring in my view in this. I see Bitcoin as an asset, digital asset, and this is very much like giving gold to someone. So that $40 that they receive is gold and will increase. It is wonderful to see, and I think there are other countries who have US dollars as their base currency, which where you could see, no, that's the currency that most people also globally keep as an asset for longevity. The one thing there is about Bitcoin is that no one controls it. So as a result, we will also see the rise of the central bank digital currency because large country, and we're already seeing it in China, which is CBDC, or the $10 that is happening in Bahamas, need to be able to control their economies. I think El Salvador never had control when they had USD. This way, they're creating a different asset class that their communities can actually depend on. So I think there is a lot of opportunity for digital representation. But as for myself, I do not see Bitcoin as money. I see it as an asset, which can then be used to receive liquidity with.
Sure. Yes.
Just an interesting perspective. It's something that El Salvador has to think about it really, because much of El Salvador is also doesn't know about the technology. So it's really when they see that they don't think much about it, but the community, yes, they go wild. That's something that I say. Okay, I will talk this. The next question is more about the technology of the blockchain, because I listen that is about the DLT, the distributed ledger technology. In system engineer, we talk about a database a lot, and I think a blockchain that has really cool features, and it's really excellent for an engineer to use it. We're talking about the public DLT and the private DLT. The question is, how can we leverage the trust of a public DLT while maintaining the advantage of private DLT networks? Because it's excellent that private DLT offers a lot of features, but doesn't have the same trust that public DLT has. And what do you think about that?
I was expecting Dr. Ramados to get this one.
Sure. I mean, so the question is about private DLT, which one to choose. I mean, it totally depends on the use case, because see, the thing about public DLT is public chains, and it was designed as for pseudonymous transactions. You know, the person, you know, you can transfer Bitcoin without knowing, you know, without disclosing who you are. I mean, and but that was the designed architecture. But you know, in case of private, like, you know, Genevieve talked about Corda, you know, it's you have to, you know who they are, who the participants are, and you know what they're doing, and you know, you got to see. I mean, you can't really combine, you can't really get the advantages of one and, you know, both in one. It just doesn't work that way. Because, for example, you know, the scalability is an issue with, you know, the more nodes you have. I mean, like, for example, like you're talking about 10,000 nodes are participating in, you know, public chains, versus you're talking about hundreds of nodes in a private chain. Obviously, the private chains are going to be faster. It's, then the participants are managed, the identities are known, and you know, basically there are many articles written about like how you choose blockchain for your use case. So you have to kind of go through your exercise, check, and then it'll tell you, do you want this or this?
Yes.
Can
Okay,
I
it's more
add
like
to
a
this? Let me add to
Sure.
this. So what happens is that we have to remember that we want this to go into enterprise. So you are going to have what's called the unique selling proposition. So I am not a big fan of IP, but I do believe very much in the unique selling proposition. So when we look at banking, everybody in banking does the same thing, but each one of them provide different services at different prices to different clients. So this is information that if you were putting onto the blockchain, you would only share with the participants that need to know it. So what we have looked to do in our solution is that participant information, that dealing needs to be kept on the who is participating, who needs to know that information, and only if there's an auditing, bring in that auditing function. But you can then now, this is why AI and machine learning are so important, because you can take that data now and you start moving it up to where you create anonymity for the participants, but get enough information in the public domain to be able to allow governments and other functionaries, IGOs, to make the right decisions. So one of the things I'm very excited that's happening into the blockchain arena now is really the use of confidential computing. So this is now being able to, we are putting data in a form of database that no one can control. Everybody participate based on their role. And now you put in this layer of confidential computing, which is really starting to have the trust between the builder of the technology, to where I don't need to know what the data is. I just need to know that the system is working. And then information is disseminated to those who need to know. So you could imagine pandemic, when we didn't know where supplies were, where you can now have a better way of redistributing that information without having to tell the detail of cost and secret of those companies who are participating.
Perfect. Yes. Something to think about it when trying to solve the use cases using a new technology.
So, I mean, I believe that the both systems will coexist. I don't believe that one is going to take over the other. I know the public blockchains are primarily towards decentralization. Yeah, that has its, you know, place. And then also the private will also continue to evolve, and they both will continue to evolve, and they will coexist.
Perfect. We have some more questions on the public, which is Kunal Sa. What are your thoughts about CBDC, which we know in reality is a reality, but in the large scheme of things, how will they be different from current FEAT? It's more about CBDC.
I guess I talked about this, so I will take this one. I don't know if Kunal, you saw that slide I had where there are many projects that are being carried out by many central banks around the world. And in fact, I think China was actually early. I mean, they were cracking down on cryptocurrencies and recently on crypto mining and all that, but they actually started this, they were leading the CBDC effort. They did actually a pilot study, I think last year with in Beijing, and they were actually running this pilot with Starbucks and McDonald's in Beijing. So the bottom line is, you know, I think it's going to become real pretty soon, and you know, the interesting thing is, seems like I mean, there's not going to be one, just like today we have currencies. There's going to be multiple central bank digital currencies. So some of them actually are joining and doing together, like Thailand, you know, UAE, Hong Kong, and they're like doing one study. So it's going to be interesting. There's going to be multiple CBDCs, and like it's here. In fact, if you want to know more about this, you know, you can see the report, this report here at the bottom. Actually, there are many reports. This is one of the reports that, you know, came out last month. You can take a look at it to understand more. What was the question specifically about CBDC?
Okay, it says that it is now the control is back with or stays with the central banks. This is another question about CBDC.
So banks? No, what was the question? Sorry. Control of central banks?
He says, my point about CBDC is that now the control is back with or stays with the central banks. Is it not that against the core principles behind Bitcoin and blockchain?
That is true, because, you know, if you really want to know about it, I'll show you one slide where when Bitcoin was launched, it was, the whole idea was it should be completely decentralized. But what happened was, let me see if I can show you that slide. Over time, now Bitcoin became, you know, it's now under the control of, you see the slide I'm sharing? Mining pools. You know, it became under the, over time, it became under the control of mining pools. So anyways, there are other blockchains and altcoins that try to address the issue. But yeah, bottom line, yeah, it's going to be private blockchain. It's going to be under the control of central banks. And that's why I made a comment, like, you know, public chains and private chains are going to coexist. And that's the way it's going to be. And all these assets, the crypto assets, are on, you know, public chains, and we have all these, you know, not only CBDCs. You know, you guys heard about this Facebook Dime project, the corporate currency. They're trying to issue a corporate currency. You know, there's a consortium that you can look it up, and, you know, yeah, it's all coming. I mean, it's also centralized. And is it going to be used? Yeah, I mean, if it, you know, there's a potential. I mean, it got some legal hurdles. You know, I don't know if you're following closely. Last year there was a hearing, I think year before, and then, you know, they were actually trying to start before the government, and the government, you know, kind of like they put some hold on the project. Now the government is doing projects now. U.S. government is doing a project on central and CBDC. And obviously, yeah, these are all centrally controlled currencies. And it does go against the philosophy of, you know, the original idea of Bitcoin. I mean, you can see, like, where Bitcoin is today.
Yeah, I was going to say also CBDC, we need to think there's two types of CBDC. There's what we're calling the wholesale and the retail. Retail will be where it touches individuals, and
Again, even the
believe
original
me,
process, you
there
have to check,
are
like,
a
government
lot
has
of
to
concerns that I have with it, because you start losing the anonymity that we have with cash. However, you can think of a country, some of so let's say what the Bahamas is doing, it allows for much more fluid exchange of a digital representation. And this is exactly as Dr. Ramados said, the leftover of the DM project, which was really looking at this. When Facebook started this, they were looking at it being across all currencies, across all countries, and then eventually became smaller and smaller to where it would be pegged against the USD. China is an example of a retail CBDC. We're not hearing a lot about the wholesale ones, such as France, Sweden, because what they are doing is that the government is lending money to organizations, something that they do right now. And instead of having to move from the government to a bank to then those hedge funds, it's going directly from government to those hedge funds. And it is a digital representation of that payment and also repayment of those. So I think also that's the case with the Corona. So we should be looking at what is happening. But to me, until we bring in digital identity as part of this, I have concerns, because this could also create a siege. And this is something they're talking about in China, whereby you create a siege against a community or an individual. So we really need to be careful, because if you can't have a mechanism by which to buy your food and to get your water, and the only way is something that is controlled by a central government, that is scary in my book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. As a conclusion, as a summary, can each speaker can say a final message to us? You can start, Genevieve.
It has been a great pleasure to be part of this day. Not only did I learn a lot from Lucas and Dr. Ramados, but also the questions were excellent. And I do hope that the contribution helped some of you be able to understand the future of what I think there is a lot of future in this technology and the opportunity that it creates. And no matter what, it's really about learning what's going on. We're all learning. Every day is something new for me also. And so those of you, even if you're starting today, you have an opportunity to become a leader in the space, because we do need a few.
Here a lot of students on the call, correct? Frank mentioned there's quite a few students, and yeah, if you're interested in getting into the enterprise world, you can learn Hyperledger, Corda for banking. So there's a lot of open source codes and courses. And if you're interested in startup, playing with all this wild experimentation in the crypto ecosystem, you can learn Ethereum. You could start with that. I'll stop there. Yeah.
Yeah, my last words to you guys is thank you that I can be part of this here. Thanks, Frank. I have learned a lot today. Really, it was nice to meet you all. And yes, my last words for you is I think we should all be part of this new technology, maybe of this new part of digitalization. And I think we have really the opportunity to shape this new tenets, and this is for me the cool thing. Yes. And if any one of you want to get really deep into the Bitcoin rabbit hole, yeah, we can talk about it. And for me, like the CBDCs and what we have talked about, it's for me the only stable coin in the crypto space is BTC. I think if the market is getting bigger and bigger, and there are more like customers in the Bitcoin ecosystem, the volatility for the Bitcoin price is decreasing. And I think for me, it's honestly the real stable coin in the crypto space. And as I said before, for me, the most important thing, maybe it is possible that CBDCs maybe get back like the gold standard with Bitcoin. This would be good, yes.
Well,
Thanks for inviting.
I
Frank,
think,
yeah.
thank you, Ramesh, 𝐄𝐕𝐄𝐍𝐓, Fernando, thank you for being the moderator. Lucas, thank you very much for all your information and input. It's a hot subject. There are many applications in blockchain. I myself, I'm finishing a course at MIT on digital transformation, and one of the chapters was blockchain, and it was intense. Also, thank you to UCIL, UTEC, UDEP in Peru for helping organize it, this event. Also, UTP and Universidad of Panama also to help us doing this. And IEEE Blockchain Initiative, Ramesh, thank you for supporting the event. I hope we do more together. And also IEEE TEMS, Blockchain and DLT's Technical Committee for supporting us too. Thank you and hope to see you soon. Hopefully not virtually. Bye.
Goodbye.